Hey everybody, Outdoor Detective here. Thought I'd go over a little project that I'm working on here that coincides with my Jackery Explorer 500. And it has to do with these two 12 volt DC outputs. This is your typical cigarette lighter output like everybody's explained in all the videos. The dilemma that I have with Jackery is they explain nothing in their instructions. And I'll take a picture of that and add it to the video here, but they explain none of the specs needed to make this work. Originally, I thought it was the typical male and female type plugs that you would use in surveillance cameras that are also 12 volt, but I tried those because I have a whole bunch of them, and they weren't even close to fitting. So what I found out was by, like everyone else doing a bunch of research, is that it turns out that they're 6.5 by 4.3 by 1.4 millimeter plugs. And the only place, well, I shouldn't say the only place, the most reasonable place I found it is with this Mauser Electronics. You can find them on eBay, but these plugs are outrageously expensive on eBay. So here, as you see, this is the plugs with the part number. I'll put the link in the description below relative to these plugs. But this is what they look like, and I'm going to show you how. So this is all you get. You get the plug with no wire. So when you take the plug apart, you end up with, see if I can get it to focus here. You end up with this. So, as a result, this is what I made, and I'm going to go back over this and show you how I made another one. So here's my initial plug that I made, and this is 18 gauge wire, and here's the adapter end. And the reason I made these is I'm going to use this Jackery to allow me to control two transducers or fish finders and a nighttime blacklight for my boat. And in doing so, when I'm done, obviously I can just disconnect it, get rid of the jumper plug, and remove my fish finders, and away I go. So the first thing I had to do here was determine the negative pole on the output. So as you see here to my left is a multimeter. We'll set it on 20 volts for DC. And we'll see if we can't check this and figure out which pole that they're supposed to be on. Oops. Okay. Sorry, I had the hold button depressed. So what I did was I determined by touching the casing, if you can see that, and then the center pole. As you can see, it's 13.3 volts. If I were to do it the other way, use the positive on the casing and the negative pole for the center, take notice that it has a negative voltage. That's because it's backwards. So that means the center pole is your positive lead, the casing is your negative lead. Okay, so for the Jackery, that means my center pole, which is inside there, is the very center. Let's see if I can point to it. I'm having a hard time making this focus for you. I apologize. Inside, there you can see, right here is your center, and where the U is, we'll clamp that around our negative side. So we're going to solder that positive pole in place, and then we'll also solder the negative side after we put the wire in place. Okay, as we get started here, I'm sure some people are going to ask relative to the equipment that I'm using. So here we have a substantial amount of different size shrink tubing. I'm going to actually use the butane solder gun, which is this one right here, because of its size and ability to get into the places I need. Cutting tools, screwdrivers, all kinds of connectors. And I have an additional amount of connectors that are sitting on that workbench right there. I don't think I'm going to need any of them. I believe what I have in place will work. And the opposing end for the jumper end of the cable, I'm just going to use these simple butt plugs so they can be attached and reattached multiple times, just to make that jumper cable work with the onboard wiring in the boat. Alright, so the first thing we need is whatever our conductor lead's going to be, or our jumper is going to be made out of. This is a single cable with 2 conductor. So this is called 18-2. And the first thing I'm going to do is strip the outer casing. So I'm going to do it, just pinch it slightly, rotate. If I break it, break its back is what it's called. Slide the casing off. 2 perfectly good conductors. So to me they're a little bit long, because I'm also going to want to put shrink tubing on them as well for the conductors I put on the end. So give me a second to cut these down and we'll be right with you. Okay, so what we have is a piece of shrink tubing that'll fit down the wire and then up to my connector. So we'll open this up. Simplest way is to pinch the edges and allow it to open up for you. We'll slide our wire in, and we'll actually slide it down the conductor so it's out of the way for the time being. Then what we need to do is, looking at it, is determine how far we need to go into the conductor. So obviously our negative conductor is going to be just slightly shorter than the red wire positive conductor. So let me cut them down. And we should get started. So there you have it. Something that short. And let me open this one up also. Strip the wire. And then I'll twist it. That just keeps the wires from separating. And then let me set you up for how we're going to solder this. All right, let's see if we can't get this soldered in there. Just waiting for my solder gun to heat up here. Alright, let's see if we can't get this soldered up for you. I have lead-free solder, 1.27 millimeter, and this is a butane solder gun. And from all places, I don't know if you can see that, it came from Radio Shack. I actually missed that place. So let's see if we can't get this done. Heating up the metal. The problem is I didn't let it sit long enough to warm up on its own. I'm just trying to do it outright. There we go. Okay. That conductor's in there. And now we're going to take the negative conductor, put it underneath the red wire, and pinch the negative pole straps around the wire. Then we'll fire this back up and solder that in. Okay, so the biggest thing, I'm not sure if you can see that, is there's a slight gap between the positive and negative conductors. Once I solder this in, I'm going to lay a very small piece of electrical tape just to prevent the conductors from grounding out. If you do it right, you won't need it, but in this case, I'm always going to put that in there just as a precaution because I don't want that to happen. Let me set this up. Okay, so the negative pole, you can actually bend down a little bit before you make this attempt at putting the solder in there. We'll heat this up and then we'll be able to bend it back. And before we bend it back, that's when we'll put that little piece of electrical tape in there after it cools down. Okay, very good. All right, let's let it cool down for a minute. We'll get right back to you. All right, so as you can see, we bent the negative lead back up. We put a very small piece of electrical tape between the two conductors. Again, not necessary, it's just something that I do. And then we'll take the actual lead and the cover that comes with these connectors, and we'll thread it, because it is threaded internally. Look at that, works right on there. And then we're going to take our shrink tubing that we put on here, and we're going to push that all the way up. And normally I would do it from the other end, but since you're watching, we're going to do it from here. There we go. There we go. The conductor's all done. So now what we're going to do to make sure that this is complete and done appropriately, we're going to open up the conductor on the opposing end and then check the leads to see if they're still proper, if they're still negative to negative and positive to positive. Okay, well, let's see if our soldering work is appropriate. That's now off. We'll turn that back on so we get DC. We'll plug that in. We have our multimeter turned on. We're going to touch positive to positive, negative to negative, and let's see what we get. 13.3 on the positive pole. So it looks like we're good to go. Okay. So we disconnected from the Jackery. We're going to put another piece of shrink tubing over both wires, or both conductors, and down the outer insulation. I'm going to put a small piece of shrink tubing over the negative conductor, one over the positive conductor. These are the butt connectors that I was referring to. I'm going to add these, crimp them on, make sure the conductor's all the way inside, squeeze. Now what I like to do is rotate it 180 degrees and just move it slightly down the sleeve and do it again. That's making sure that it's on there really well. Again, make sure the conductor's all the way in, which it is. Spin it 180 degrees. You don't have to, that's just what I do. Pinch the sleeve again. So basically the wire inside there with the conductor goes like this. It's not just straight and pinched down once, it actually makes like an S on the inside. So we'll cover these with the shrink tubing. Push it up the conductor, and there we have it. We'll shrink them up a little bit. Okay, we're good to go. Give that a second to cool. Then we're going to slide the outer casing to cover this shrink wrap. And we'll be good to go. That'll be our jumper that we'll use for the Jackery to power other devices by using the 12 volt DC jacks outputs. There we go. Okay, we're good to go. There we go. Now this would actually go into my lead, which is the male end of the butt connector, and I'll wire this to my actual fish finders, and then we'll be able to connect it right to these jumpers, and we'll be able to power the devices for long fishing trip outings. One of my fish finders is 1.5 amp draw because it's a side view fish finder. The other one's just a clear view down scanner. That's only a half of an amp. So that's only 2 total amps, considering this is pushing, it says 10 amps. I believe in the book it also says that it's only 7 amps. So either way, I'm under the allotted power output for the conductors. So we're good to go. Any comments or questions? Let me know. Appreciate you watching. Thank you. See you in the next one.